some outside consultants called the FCS Group did a rate analysis for water and sewer and GFCs, and they determined back in 2020 that the utility on the sewer side needed a 2% increase. 2% increase every year for 5 years. Well, for the first 2 years, nothing happened. But then the last 3 years, a 3% rate increase was implemented, of which we're seeing the effects of that this year. The challenge with that is the revenue stream that you would have received between 21 and 22, you don't capture that or in the future years by even doing a larger rate increase. The way rates work is they compound one on top of the other. So if you have 2% one year, then 2% the next year is 2% on top of the 2%. So on the far right side, you see the water rates. Very similar. You see that there was a water rate increase in a period of no rate increases and then a rate increase of 3%. Again, the blue diamond or rectangle is what was recommended by our outside consultants, and the city did not accomplish that. What is interesting to note is we also overlaid on both of these inflation. So in 2017, the inflationary rate was around a little over 2%. And you can see it fluctuated and went down to as low as 1.4 or 5%. But in 2022, went up to over 8%. On the effects of that really means that the purchasing power that we had as a utility was impacted by that inflationary rate. And again, remember my comment about it additive. So an 8% one year on top of a 4% the next year, that's not like a 4%, that's a 12% cost increase on us. But we only increased our ability to pay for things by 2-3%. So just like when we're at home and the cost of living is going up for us in our private lives, we would look to our employers to at least bring us close to the inflationary rate so we could have the same quality of life. Not always able to achieve that, but sometimes in general, that's what you're targeting. For a utility, that means that our buying power has diminished every year, compounding, getting worse and worse. What that means is that our ability to perform our work in the future is diminishing also. So we want to take a look at, well, how do Sequim's rates compare to our neighbors? Because that's always one of the first questions I always get when I'm talking about rate increases. Well, what about our neighbors? How are they charging their residents? So on the sewer side, you can see that we're in the lovely lavender color. I call it purple, but I was told I was wrong. And our rate in 2019 was $59.38, and in 2020, I was $64.88. When you look at Port Angeles, their rates have varied. They've gone up and they've gone down, which is kind of an odd thing, but they must do a rate adjustment every year, which is unusual. Port Townsend was more stable for a number of years, pretty close to us. When the last couple of years, their rates have jumped up appreciably on the sewer side. You look at the water utility bill, and let me just first off by saying that every water utility, like every sewer utility, has different rate drivers. One of the reasons why I believe that our rates are lower is because we have primary sources is coming out of the groundwater, and the groundwater doesn't require a lot of treatment. The other two entities, PA and PT, they take their water out of surface water sources. So they have pre-treatment they have to do, and they have chlorination. They have to do a lot more to clean up the water so it's drinking water standards acceptable. But even with that, you take a look at Port Townsend, and their rates have been steadily climbing every year, where they are over twice as much as the city of Sequim is here in 2025. And you look at Port Angeles, and they are still considerably above where we are in 2025. Just for grins, we decided we'd take a look at the PUD rates. Oh, sorry, I jumped a slide. So going back, before I let the cat out of the bag on the PUD rates, let's talk about what it means to the average single-family resident when you're looking at their combined bill on their water and sewer. Same color scheme. You see that when you're looking at water and sewer over the last 6 years, ours have gone up by just under $10 per month, whereas our peers around us, and particularly Port Townsend, has gone up considerably from 130 to 190, from 145 to 162 for PA. Now, I'm not saying that their rates are not inappropriate. I don't know enough about their utilities to say it is or it isn't. Every utility is at different stages too. They may have determined that their buried pipes infrastructure needs to be replaced already, whereas ours are still in good shape, so that's not a big cost driver. We'll talk about cost drivers in a few minutes. But as you can see right now, if anybody says that being in Sequim is too expensive, you can point to this and say, well, not really, when you're looking at water and sewer. Now, I believe, yes, thank you. I finally got my timing right. So on the PUD serves everybody outside the city limits who's not on a separate standalone water system. 2019 to 2025, I don't know what metric you would want to use that doesn't show that they are vastly more expensive than our water system. But I will also say that at the PUD, they're serving an area vastly greater than ours with fewer customers on a density basis. So there's justification why their costs are going to be higher. I also don't know if they have complete groundwater system or groundwater and surface water. I believe it's a combination. But no matter how you slice it, if you look at it and say coming out of the tap, it's cheaper for our residents to get the water from us than from anybody else. One of the other things I wanted to go through with you is our general facility charges, GFCs. So what is the general facility charge? This is what we charge new customers when they hook into our system. Well, why do you do that? Well, principally because we believe that development should pay for development, the impacts. They're also not just paying for future expansions of the system because now we have more people on it. They're also paying for buy-in. They're buying into the system that already was pre-existing that others helped pay for. So they're helping to offset that. And they're also buying into the maintenance, long-term maintenance of the system that they're buying into. So when you're looking at the sewer, that was definitely an adjustment. You can see the line drops between 20 and 2021. That's a big drop from a little over 9,000 to a little over 7,500. The analysis at that time showed that that was the appropriate GFC for the sewer. Sewers and water GFCs are a little more of a complicated kind of calculation. They don't necessarily get done very often, but they probably should be done a little more often than what we have been doing them here. Water did have an increase in 20 and 21. But again, I want to point to the fact that these are flatlined from 21 to the present. At the same time, there's that doggone green line again. That's inflation. So when we're collecting money from people who are hooking into our system, the new customers, when it's costing us more to conduct business related to their attachment to our system, we're buying less with our dollars. So that needs to be addressed, in our opinion. When we're looking at GFCs, some jurisdictions, some utilities charge GFCs, some don't. When we charge for GFCs, we're basically having the new people pay for their impact. When they don't charge for GFCs, you'll see their rates are typically higher because everybody's paying for it. So that's a different philosophy. Neither one's right, neither one's wrong. It's just not the way the Sequim has approached it. What I want you to take away from this is that the highly variable nature of GFCs, like 2018 on the sewer, that was outstanding collection. But that was also when Carlsberg attached to our system. So we got a lot of money coming from that. And then you look at the water and you've got some years that are high, and you can probably point to a couple of big developments that occurred in those particular years. But notice 2023 and 2024, water and sewer, those were not great years for GFCs. That means we didn't have a lot of new connections. That's all it means. This year, we're already on a trend to be looking and pushing towards $700,000 on our GFCs. That's good news. The problem for when you're doing projects is when you have such a highly variable funding coming in, it's really hard to plan for it. So this is the icing on the cake. This is when we have it, we use it to apply for the new extensions and the new work that we have to do, the upsizing of infrastructure, but we still have to rely on our rates as the base for doing a lot of this. Capital spending is one of the major drivers, whether it's water or sewer. And we're going to be going into some of the other drivers as we get further into this. But capital spending is a big one. And when you look at the water and you look at the sewer and you look at the history over just the last 10 years, then projecting till 2030, so for 15 years, you can see something that's pretty darn evident is there's a lot of spending in this time period. And each one of these are very important projects. So none of these are like, well, we can just not do these. We actually have to do them. The good news is this shows the spending, but what it doesn't show is the revenue. Some of this stuff has money coming in from developers and others, or grants, like, for example, Flora's Acres grant for the water side is coming to us as revenue, but it shows an expense. So I don't get too worried about this, other than to say the fact that we're doing more work in both utilities. And when you're doing more work and your rates aren't set up to handle more work, then things get problematic very quickly. Yeah.
I'm so sorry, I forgot the microphone rule. So GFCs are collected and then saved for projects down the road. They don't have to all be spent within. Is there? Well, that's a side question.
There's no timeline.
Okay.
No timeline. Yeah, we use the GFCs to pay for new growth and expansions of our system that's related to all the growth that's been going on. Yeah.
Great. Thank you. So those good years kind of help balance out the bad years.
They do, but you'll see more that Amy's going to share with you on that. With that, I'm going to have Amy talk about our tools and how we got to where we are now.
All right. So in 2020, FCS, we spent about $100,000 for them to do a utility rate and GFC review. This resulted in a level of service change for the sewer division and recommended a consistent utility rate increase for both water and sewer. Those were not adopted by council at that time. We used that same model for 2022, and internal staff used it and updated it and recommended a 3% increase per year for 3 years, which council did adopt. So we forewent the extra $100,000 spend and did it on our own in 2022. Bouncing forward 3 years, we have made a giant leap to some new technology, and we purchased a software package called Waterworth, and it is an interactive decision-making tool with live scenarios and some long-term projections. So our CIP generally looked at 6 years maximum, so most of our rates looked within that CIP window, and this allows us to look 10, 20, 30, you name the years, and we can plug it into the scenario. Before we dive into the analysis and the fiscal tool, I want to remind everyone that an old, very good saying, garbage in, garbage out. Any model output is only as good as the information put into it. So this is true of our analysis, which is why we spent the last 6 months ensuring our data entered into the system was correct and that all of the links between the different ins and outs of the system were correct. The funding and the expenses balanced, and we corrected any issues we saw and are ready to go into that analysis with you. So I've provided you guys a little handout for terminology. This is going to come in handy because there's a lot of terms used. Most of these I think you guys are familiar with. So your sale of service is just your utility rates. You get those every month. Other operating revenue, this is your GFCs, which are charged on new development buy into the system that Paul was just talking about. Developer contributions, these are specific projects that benefit the development, and they're offset by capital expansions, which you can see is the last one on the list. And then there's non-operating revenue, so these are your interest, sale of assets, insurance recoveries, things like that. Grants, so external funding that doesn't have to be repaid, and borrowed funds. These are your loans, which do have to be repaid, so they're kind of a double-edged sword. On the cost side, you have your operating expenses, so these are your wages, your supplies, utilities, overhead, your current debt services, which is loan and principal payments, which occur each year to repay that borrowed money. Your capital improvements, which are our projects, repair, replace, new construction, and then capital expansion, which have developer contributions that offset them. So the rate drivers include staff costs. So we've talked a lot about our staff in the last few presentations. Equipment costs, so things like our new vac truck, crew vehicles, big equipment to do the work that the crews need to do. We have materials such as our AC pipe, meters, pumps, motors, that type of stuff. Emergency response. So emergencies, this is a picture of the water line repair up by the Rainy Well. Debt services, which is our principal and our interest that we pay annually, depending on the loan. Spot repairs, this is a vacuum out of a valve box. These are repairs that happen, not necessarily predicted, sometimes can be predicted, but not always. Replacement of worn out systems, such as this is our Doe Run lift station that is currently being replaced. Capital improvements, expansion for growth. This is the rendition of the West Sequim Bay lift station out on Forest Road, correct? Forest Road. Development of new water supply. This is a picture of the well, the deep well that we were drilling back in February of last year. Regulatory compliance. This includes compliance to today's regulations, as well as preparation for new compliance coming at us. And then technology improvements. So this is the Possum van, which is the camera system that looks down the sewer pipes. And then the AMI for the meter reading system out of the water division.
For the capital program, I just want to remind you that it is driven by the outcome of the growth projections through our comp plan, driven by GMA. It allows us also to do predictions of our system needs, where we're going to have bigger pipe, where we're going to have new pressure zones, reservoirs, et cetera. We have a robust asset management program. We talked about that on all three of the previous presentations, how important that was. The observed wear and tear, this comes from citizens and crew, our technology improvements, and our regulatory compliance. The regulatory compliance is sometimes something that just hits us. We try to stay up with all the regulatory agencies, what they're doing, what their current thoughts are and projections. Sometimes they don't surprise us, but sometimes they do things we may not agree with, but we have to comply with. And those can be very, very expensive. For the capital side, because we knew that capital was going to be a major driver, we took the time as a team to go through all the projects we had on our water and our sewer list. We talked about the project's needs and the timelines. Did we have the timelines right? Can they be delayed? Why do we have so many in the first 5 years? We need to stretch this out. Not only were the members of the leadership team, my leadership team, involved in it, but we also involved and engaged with the other engineering team and as well as the ops team. When we had a doubt about a project and different components, we send the crews out there, pothole that water line, see what condition it is, run the cameras up that sewer line, see does it need to be replaced at the same time as the road is being done. We had some projects that, frankly, they were on the list. They'd been on there for a while, but the scope on them was so ambiguous, so vague. It was like it was a good idea, but no work had been done to prove it out. And the costs for those were a bit of a wild guess. So we took a certain number of projects and we put them on a separate list. We didn't keep them on the CIP. We put them on a separate list, and they're going to be investigated further once they prove themselves out as necessary and we have a good scope. We know when and we know how much it's going to cost. We'll bring those back into the CIP in the future. We also made a determination that for water and sewer, we're going to replace them when it's needed, not when it's convenient. Because we're doing a road project, I think general philosophy, and it's not a bad philosophy, is if you're tearing the road up, you might as well do the water and the sewer at the same time. I come with a different perspective, which is that water and that sewer line that's in there has a distinct life to it. And the community invested in that. And if you tear it up before that life is done, then you're throwing away good money. So let's not do that. A road needs to be resurfaced, depending on the nature of the road, every 10 to 20 years. So when we're looking at the water and we're looking at the sewer, if they're in great shape and they don't need to be replaced, we're not going to replace them. If there's no other reasons why we need to replace. Now, there may be some because of, for example, capacity, where the pipe is just too small. And our system plan says that you got to put in a 12-inch and you got an 8-inch in there. So that's a different factor. Replace it when needed, not when convenient.
So the Waterworth model, how does it work? It's a scenario builder, so long-term projections, produces a graph, so it's super easy to look at and tell where we're at. It's live, it's interactive, scenario builds, so we can do as many different scenarios as we want, and we can continuously update it. So it's not like we pay a big amount up front and then never touch it again. We actually can look at it every month, every quarter, once a year. That's to our discretion. It's got a great visual to it, so you can look at it and in a glance, you can kind of see where we're at. And it's a great transparency tool for the public.
Which gets us out of the consulting business.
Yep.
There's big savings there.
So your terminology handout might be handy to have it with you as we move forward. So we're going to build what the Waterworth model actually looks like. So on the revenue side, the first thing that comes in is our sale of service. So this is the first 5 years are historical data, so 20 through 24, and then 25 through 40 is our projection. This is sample data. We will get into the sewer and the water models in just a minute. I just want to show you how it's actually built. So on top of the sale of service, we have other operating revenues. So these are your GFCs. We have our developer contributions, our non-operating revenue, and then our grants and our borrowed funds. And that makes up our revenue bars. Again, we look at that 25 through 30 would have been that 6-year CIP that we're looking at. And for this model, we can look out, we chose to 2040. We could choose longer or shorter, but we felt that represented well. So on the expense side, same thing. We have our operating expenses. We build on it with our current debt services. That's money we have already borrowed that we need to pay back. We have our proposed debt service. So if we are projecting a loan, we can look at how much that projection is going to affect our ability to do projects and rates. We look at our capital improvements, and then we look at our capital expansions. Again, those expansions are related to your developer contributions. That's why we show them in a different color. So we overlay these on top of each other. So now your expenses are in the back. They're your mountains. And the bars are your revenue up front. And then we can apply a guideline. So this red dotted line is our operating threshold. So this is the policy of the city to maintain 2.5 years worth of repair or replace capital expenses as our minimum balance. And then on top of that, the black line is actually where we project our cash to be. Okay, so see, as they mimic each other, we like the black line, obviously, to be above the red line, and they should be fairly close. That's ideal. So the sewer model. When we get all done, we can look at live scenarios, but we have chosen 3 scenarios to share with you. The first one being scenario A. This is an assumption of a 3% cost inflation per year. So that's general inflation. 3% seems pretty standard. We're going to use that across the board on our costs. It has no inflation on our GFC fees, and it has no inflation on our utility rates. And it's the capital projects that we have proposed based on what we believe the need is, not the want. So back to Paul's earlier slide about how we made our decisions about capital. So as you can see, in 2028, we start trending down. So that's this line right here. The black line trends down. And so what's happening as we basically are exceeding our revenue. That's really the basis of it. So in 2030, we actually cross below that line. 2029, we cross below the red line, and we head way negative by 2030. So what happens when we cross the line? This decreases our flexibility to handle change. So if an emergency popped up, cash in hand to do that emergency would be affected. It could mean delays or stop of projects that are growth related, right? Because we need to be able to just maintain the repairs that we have. It could be potential delays in those repairs. And then in 2030, as you see us actually crossing the zero value line, that means we would be laying off staff, shutting down services. That's a drastic move.
What it shows is that we're not following the policy that you have agreed to on what reserves we should have on hand. The red is the reserves, and we're going against our own internal policy, which affects our audits and affects our rating, our financial rating, our Moody rating. So you just don't want to not follow your city policy.
As you can imagine, when we saw this, when we put it in the model and cleaned everything up, we saw this, it caught our attention. And with this tool that Amy's quite excited about, actually, that it gives us the ability to look far enough ahead that we can prevent these types of things from hitting us and coming and asking for a massive rate increase.
All right, so scenario B, this one looks a little bit different. There's a 3% increase in the GFC fees applied here, as well as a 3% utility rate increase. So what this does is basically apply inflation to both our rates as well as our GFCs. As you can tell, it keeps us from being negative. However, it doesn't get us above that red line, which is our policy line. So it still increases our risk because we are below the policy line. It increases the risk for borrowing, for being able to maintain the structure, the infrastructure that we have. So scenario C, the last of the three scenarios, has a better long-term projection. So the assumptions included in this are the 5% increase in rates between 26 and 28, and then a 3% per year between 29 and 32. So you can tell it gets us right above the line, not a whole lot above the line, but maintains that balance. So the capital sewer projects that are in front of us to the left side of your screen are the ones that are actually in process right now. So they are things we have been working on between 24, 25, and we'll continue some of them into 26. The projects on the left side, on the right side, are projects from 26 to 2030. I gave you a handout of projects that are actually scheduled all the way out to 2040.
One of the things I want to point out is on the left side, it says aerobic digester capacity upgrade. That's a study. We did not preliminarily, we have a preliminary report from the engineering firm doing the work. That work is not in the capital program right now because they're estimating between 20 million and 45 million. That is something we cannot fund ourselves, and it would blow our rates apart. That's the type of a project where there is grant funds available on the sewer side. So once we get a chance to review, vet that report and figure out what we need that's Sequim sized, then we'll do a process for figuring out how much money we need to allocate towards it and how much we're going to anticipate going after grant funds, which will be the lion's share of it. Those are the types of projects I want to say that we made a conscious decision to move to the list while we're working through things.
All right, the water model, same set of years, 2020 through 2040. So first 5 years will be actual data, and then the next 15 are our projections. So for the water model A, looks very similar to what sewer looked like. We start taking a sharp downturn in 28. And in fact, in 29, we cross over that policy line. So again, that's the decrease in our flexibility to the changing conditions, affects our ability to get loans, affects our ability to respond to emergencies. In 2032, the forecast is showing we would actually run out of cash, which would put us in that same situation where we're reducing or shutting off services and reducing staff. Next model we looked at, again, this is similar to sewer where we looked at, well, what if we just kept up with inflation? So 3% on GFCs, 3% on rates. And you can see it gets us a few more years. So we stay above that policy line until about 33. And then we take another sharp turn down. Model C, we thought was a reasonable scenario for a long-term projection, which is an assumption of 6-year utility rate increase, along with holding on to that 3% inflation increase per year on the GFCs. So there's a little bit of a shuffle here. However, as you look at these models, the farther out you get, the more we'll be able to refine how that actually is going to look as the years go by. So by the time we're in 28, we'll have a much better look at what 36 is going to look like.
That's actually one of the benefits of this model. As Amy indicated, we'll be updating it with actual expenditures. So as the CIP progresses through time, if things cost more, then we'll have that basically money in the piggy bank to help cover that. If it costs less, then that builds up our piggy bank. Since we're going to be doing this, I'm proposing that we would bring some form of a report back to the council annually before the budget starts. So you have a sense how well we're doing as far as the utility funds goes. So again, the further out we go, the less certain we are. So we would never propose something that for a rate increase out to that period of time.
So just like with sewer on the water capital projects, left side is actual projects that are in the process of being done. So you can see some of them started in 23, but they will all be done between 23 and 26. The booster station design will be done in 26, but construction will be in 27, 28. Right-hand side is those projects that are projected between 26 and 32. You also have a handout that gives you projects all the way out to 2040. So what does a 3% GFC look like? So a 3% increase in GFCs per year is about $225 to $250 per year. That's what the increase equals. Sometimes when you hear the percent number, it sounds big. 5% increase for 3 years in rates would equate to $3.25 to $3.50 per month for a single family resident. So the cup of a black coffee over at Starbucks. Those additional 2 years that we would recommend a 3% increase in rate, that's about $2.25 to $2.50 per month. So equivalent to a small fry at McDonald's. To put it in perspective. Included on the bottom portion of this is the utility rate comparison between Port Townsend, Port Angeles, and Sequim. So we had to make an assumption about Port Townsend and Port Angeles, and so we assumed that they would, at minimum, keep up with inflation at 3%. So that's what's plugged in for them. So you can see that in 2030, at the end of a 5-year period, we are at the same rates as 2023 for Port Angeles and 2024 for Port Townsend. Looking at water, same thing, 3% GFC increase is about $250 to $275 a year. The 6% increase in utility rate for a 5-year period would be about $1.05 to $1.25 per month per single family resident. So equivalent of one item at your local dollar store. Yeah.
Now the water rates, if I recall, there's a basic charge, right? A monthly charge plus, are you looking at any changes to that, or that being weighed about increasing that versus the usage rates? Or?
I looked at it overall as an increase of 6% on both. And looking at it just for this comparison, the 500 cubic feet, just that's a kind of a natural break line, it seems. So the assumption for Port Townsend and Port Angeles, again, is 3%. So in 2030, the cost for the city of Sequim is not even on the chart for Port Townsend and Port Angeles. It's well before 2020.
One thing I want to just help people is how much is 500 cubic feet? Does anybody know? I mean, typically most people don't know 7.48 gallons per cubic foot equals. It's a little over 3,700 gallons is what that rate would equate to. So if the average household is using 120 gallons a day, how many days would that give them? That would give them 31 days. So basically what you're seeing here is a pretty good representation of what would be used. Now, if you have teenagers in your household, then all bets are off. We won't guarantee that. You got to pay what you got to pay. And if you leave the hose running in the garden for 3 days, again, that's on you, not on us. You pay what you got to pay. But it just gives you a general idea that the rates and the values are more or less set up for the typical household. So here's where the rubber hits the road. So what we're recommending, I know this is a work session, but just so you understand, after this, barring any scowls coming from everybody, say, you can't do that. And I think we've made the case that we need to do this. We're going to propose bring forward an ordinance at the next council meeting that shows the GFCs will be increased at 3% per year over the next 5 years for both utilities. The sewer rate be increased at 5% for 3 years and a 3% increase for an additional 2 years. And that the water rates see a 6% increase per year for 5 years. Keeping in mind that we will be coming back on an annual basis to tell council how this is all working out and whether we can recommend another rate increase or decrease at any time during these 5 years. But I'd also like to point out that some of the big ticket items that we're doing investigation on, for example, confirming the remaining life on our AC water main, that we took a pause actually in our analysis on the CIP. We took that out of this analysis because we need to figure out how much do we need to do first. We also are looking at our I&I system or fixes on the sewer side. Not all I&I is bad, frankly. If you got a little bit coming into your system, it's cheaper just to treat it at the treatment plant than it is to dig up all the pipes and replace them to try and solve it. So we have work that we're doing that will affect our future CIP. So maybe keeping a little bit of that for future expenditures is a good way to keep our rates down in the future. So with that, we just want to take a pause. We hit you with a lot of information, hopefully not too much, but we're trying to give you a sense of confidence that the analysis that we've been doing was very thorough. It was in-depth, and we're pretty comfortable with the recommendations moving forward. If you have no questions or when we're done answering your questions, we do want to move into a little bit of hopefully a fun interchange, a live. Let's figure out if I do 12% upfront and 3%, what does that do? We're going to give you an opportunity to be the rate setters in Amy's place. Say, what happens if we do this, if we do that? And there's an infinite number of potential probability or possibilities to do. Some of them are outrageous, like, well, let's just do a 45% increase now. Let's see what happens. But we also know that there is an acceptability to the community. When we were going through our what ifs, someone outside of our department we invited in to come and watch, and they said, well, let's do a 12% the first year. So we did that, or a couple of other lower ones. Not sure I really want to recommend a double-digit increase if we can get away with and show that a lower increase, but a longer period of time actually makes more sense. So with that, I'd like to open it up to see if you have any questions on what you've heard so far. And there's no dumb questions on this. There's just questions, and we're happy to answer them. I have Sue at the table to help us answer any questions related to our budgeting process, or any other questions you may have that may be financial that we don't feel like we should be stepping in and answering for her.
Paul, occasionally residents or council will hear from residents about our GFC, especially developers, and compare us to other cities. Did you already mention how other cities that get often quoted by not having those, how they make up for those? Did you mention that?
I did, and I'll be happy to repeat that.
I'm sorry.
No, that's fine because, there's a lot of stuff here. So those jurisdictions, those utilities that don't charge the GFCs, they make the money with higher rates. So our philosophy here in Sequim is development pays for development, right? So if you're going to impact our system, you should be contributing towards the additional changes we have to make. Plus, you got to buy into our system. In other entities, they say, well, it's all for one and one for all. You pay just like everybody else, but everyone's going to help float the boat. Different approach. Neither one's right, neither one's wrong. It's just different ways of getting the revenue stream. The rates are more consistent. And there's something you can bank on. GFCs are something that you kind of got your fingers crossed. Some years you're going to get enough to come in to fund that project you're going to build because it is directly related to growth, or you have to use utility rates to help cover it. That's why we're recommending that there be a 3% inflationary increase on our GFCs. The GFCs also need to be recalculated more frequently. We should be doing that every 3 years, honestly. So I think that's one of our next targets is in 3 years, we'll come back with the new GFC rates, in fact, maybe next year, because it's been a few years since they've been done. Like I said, they're not a simple calculation because, well, let's just leave it at that. I don't want to give you the explanation of what it takes. Your eyes will roll back in your head. But it is something that, and probably the reason why it doesn't get done all that often. But we have the expertise in-house to get it done. You want to roll into a live exercise and start throwing numbers at us and let's see what works? Okay. Now, Amy's going to run this one, so I'm going to step back and watch.
Just stop sharing and reshare. So bear with me for a minute.
So just while we're in transition, I would like to harken back to what Paul and Amy were talking about and the vetting of the capital projects and just a little bit more detail on what that entailed. We didn't simply just say, oh, we can't afford to do this, let's push it back. There was a dive into the asset management, into the condition, looking at projects saying, is this a capacity upgrade or are we just replacing this because that's what the national standard is? And so we dove into the projects and really asked that question, do we have more life? Do we need to study and analyze if this has more life, or is this a capacity upgrade? And so the optimization of that CIP was pretty key in being able to get to the point where we are today. So I just wanted to put another plug for that to make sure that it's understood that there is a financial aspect of it, but we continue to dive into that to make sure we're presenting projects that are a combination of growth and replacement of infrastructure when it's needed, not just because we would like to dig only once.
And since you brought it up, I had a quick question about like national standards and compliance type things. Is there, actually it probably depends, is there a timeline of when we as a city have to start complying? Like, do they give leeway if things cost a lot of money in order to comply? Or is it immediate, or does it depend?
The answer is all of the above. And I'm serious because there are some standards that when they roll out with them, like PFAS, in some wells, they have that. It used to be at a level that you could say, yeah, we're below that level, we're okay. Then the EPA came out and said, no, we're changing our minds. And they dropped the level so low, laboratories actually couldn't detect it. So that meant if you had it in your well, you were pretty much toast. You had to put in a charcoal filtration system at a cost of a couple $1 million, and there was a very short time frame to doing that. And then you have other ones where it's our state is a lot more reasonable like that, like to think we want to do enhanced treatment of wastewater depending on where you're at, right? You have to do it within 5 years, 10 years, or usually not sooner. And usually, for the most part, it's been my experience that they usually come along with some pot of money you can apply for. It doesn't cover everything, but they try. I do want to have to confess that through the CIP process, I did have a little fun with my team here. Because I told him initially, he said, I want you to put together your CIP wish list on when you want to have them. Don't worry about how much we can fund. I want to hear from you what you think that we need to do and when. That was wicked. I admit it, because I knew it. And they came up and we ran it. It's like, oh, there's no way we're going to be able to afford that. And so that got everybody in the mindset of saying, we need to actually look at all of them. We need to figure out what needs to happen in what year and why. And if it's linked to another project, like water and sewer, sometimes we're linked to a road project. The road project had grant funds. So it had a timeline, it had to be done, which means that we needed to go out and do that investigation on the water and sewer to see if they really did need to be replaced or not, because they were both big hits to both the utilities if we had moved forward that way. So I think Amy's ready to run with the let's have fun and let you try and set some race and see what it does to our outcome.
So to Paul's point, this is scenario 7. So we've run many scenarios, and within each scenario, there's been lots of changes. So what you're looking at right now is the sewer model. So population growth is put in there at is 2%. That's what we use for population growth on both models. You can see this is that initial scenario where we're looking at a rate of, our initial scenario where we have 0 increase in our rates. So if we were to look at a different scenario besides 0, let's just put in 6 and see what it looks like. It will show you what 6 looks like. Continuously. So, well, I have it stopped in 33, but that's what 6% over 7 years looks like. So you can see it's pretty quick and easy for us to say, well, what if this? And there's all kinds of ways of doing it, between having a consistent number each year to having changing numbers, right? Each and every year. So it leads to a lot of flexibility.
I'd add that although this goes so many years out and we know, who knows what will happen in 10 years or whatever, we're really focusing, Public Works is really focusing on the next 5 is really what's realistic. And even within that, if anything dramatically happened, they could easily, or you all could easily adjust it. So although it projects way out, the focus is kind of the next 5, right?
It is the next 5. That's where we're comfortable. Pretty confident in the projects we have. We also know that if, for example, on the pressure zone, the new pressure zone on River Road and whatnot, we have the money for doing the design, and we don't have the money for construction. So we programmed that the rates would cover $1 million and we look for another $3 million in grant funds. If for some reason that $3 million doesn't come forward, we have another project that we would bring forward to use that $1 million in that window while we continue to look for grant funding. Or we might make another project in that window and just move it up a little bit. So that gives us some flexibility. The most important aspect of this is that flexibility. Flexibility for emergencies, flexibility for opportunities that come up. For example, in the future, we're going to be looking for another location for new reservoir. We have an approximate idea of what elevation and whereabouts it would be. If someone came to us and said, hey, I got this piece of land I want to sell you. I know you don't need it for a reservoir for a number of years, but if you buy it now, it'll be yours and you can build on it. If you don't buy it now, I'm going to sell it to the developer, and then you're going to be without any available land up there because there's really very few parcels that we can make work. So we need that flexibility.
So to clarify then, any grant fundings end up being a wash because when you plug them in, then you plug in something to utilize them.
Yeah, the way we have it set up, if like there, the blue, right, in 2026, we've programmed for a grant to come in. If we don't get the grant or it comes up in a different year, we can adjust it in the software and the modeling very easily. But that grant is tied to another $1 million that comes out of the utility rates. So if we have to slide that a year or two, and we'll know this as we're moving forward, there are some projects that we haven't done the engineering on. And we think we have a pretty good idea of the cost, but when we do the engineering, if it turns out to be less, Yay us, we get to save that money, and that will offset any need for a future rate increase for the projects further out. But as I mentioned earlier, we're doing a lot more investigative work on our water and our sewer asset infrastructure, and I fully expect that we're going to find new information. I don't want to call it surprises, but new information that's going to help us better program the replacement and repair of our work moving forward in the future. Just as a side note, like our AC pipe. So there was a program for AC pipe replacement every year. It was let's just put this amount of money in there. But for me, it wasn't based upon a true analysis of what we really needed. I don't know whether 250 was enough or too much. Maybe we needed 500,000, maybe we needed 750. So we're doing the conditional assessment. We did put a restart to that program a number of years out at $750,000. But if the rest of the AC pipe is in as good a condition as some that was recently dug up, we may not need to replace that pipe for a couple more decades, in which case we would pull that out of the CIP other than spot repairs and not actual wholesale replacement or capacity increases. Those projects still move forward. Right now, Nick's going to be talking to the county because I don't know if you've been down through Carlsberg lately, but on the sewer side, the number of homes out there is over, I think, 200 right now planned, plus more. And we already know that from our system analysis that our main conveyance system running through town, portions of it need to be upgraded. That's going to be funded, a good percentage of that, I think almost 80% by the county, if I remember my numbers right. Is that about right? Okay. The problem with that is that we need cash to float it. So we will go do the replacement, but the agreement we have with the county is that they pay us at the end of the year. So if we don't have the cash on hand to pay the contractor and continue with the rest of our operations and they get paid at the end of the year, we can't do the work. And yet we have to do the work because there's the development occurring out there, and our agreement with the county says that we would accommodate that. So we have to look at all these things and make sure they all work and play well together.
And I'll just remind council, I'm sorry, Paul, I wasn't even scheduled to say a word. But I love that some of the technology that you all have supported us with, like that sewer van, that now I went down and I think I told you I did it right along and watched that high definition camera go down the sewer lines. And so we are just now getting real time live video of every inch of our sewer line so that these kind of models are accurate. They're not the guesses that, Paul has said, or they're getting very sophisticated because of the technology that you've allowed us to bring into the city.
Yeah, that Possum software with the sewer van, it actually rates the defects in the pipe. The beauty of that is that uploads into our GIS, which uploads into our asset management system. So the asset management now tells us if your pipe is a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 5, you got an immediate problem. 4, you got a problem that probably needs to be taken care of with a certain amount of time. 3, you have cracks that, you need to come back and re-TV me in 5 years. 2s and 1s, don't even think about me for 15 to 20 years. Don't go back there and TV. So what is also helping us to do is optimize our employees and the work that they're working on. So rather than TV every other year, all the sewer lines, we don't need that. Okay, I've shared with these guys that if it's a brand new piece of infrastructure by a developer, and we checked it when it's all done and no defects, don't go back out there and TV it for 20 years. Put it in the system, maybe 20 years before you go look at it, unless someone calls in with a problem. That's trying to be smarter and more efficient. And these technology, these improvements that we've been able to move forward with the funding approved of by the council, will start to pay in dividends, serious dividends. So that means that we won't need to go hire more people. We won't need to have additional money for capital work that frankly doesn't need to be done. So you've seen 6% for 7 years. So why don't you make it 6% for 3 years?
What would you like your fourth year to be? 0.
All from that point, zeros. Okay, so if you go 6% for only 3 years, you can see that 2037, we're in trouble. So make 2029 6% and see what we do there. We're getting close to what we recommended. Okay. So it's actually getting pretty good. So if you go one more year, how many? 1, 2, 3, 4. Let's go 5 years. 6%. That's the sewer model. So 6% would be great, but actually we looked for 5 and 3. So go to 5.
The gap between the policy line and the projected cash line seems pretty large there, and that's why we stepped it back. Like, okay, well, that seems like a lot. Let's look at a 5% for 3 years and then a 3% for the following 2 years. And that keeps us much closer to that policy line.
Now, it does cross a number of years down the road, but frankly, that's okay. Because we're not looking to establish a rate that's going to carry us all the way through time. We're looking for something that gives us the flexibility for the next 5 years, and it allows us to make sure that we have the funds if we're going after something, that there's any kind of a loan, not a loan, I don't like loans, but if we have to, at least we have the match for it. If we're going to go after a grant, if you're able to tell the granting agency, look, we got $1 million or $2 million that we can put towards this $3 or $4 million project, they're more inclined to give you a grant because you got skin in the game. So that's what we're looking for. We're looking to make sure that we've got the right amount of funds so we can make sure we have the skin in the game to get the money that we need.
While being able to tell your constituents we're not overcharging them and padding our accounts, we're keeping very close to the minimum policy reserves that have been set.
31, yeah. So if you look, I had Amy take out 31 and 32, and you see that up, that it always pops up as that to us. It shows that 31, 32, the projections are that we're going to still need something. So, but we're going to go for the first 5 years and put the 3% back into 31, 32, and let's see what that does to us again. Okay, so you can see it's very flexible tool. We could start off with 12% in the first year, and then we could do lower rates, but actually I don't really want to go through that unless you really want to see what a double-digit rate increase costs. Okay, so let's look at the water side now. Yeah.
What happens if you put 4.5% in the first couple of years?
Okay, let's look at 4.5. It's okay, but we started losing that cushion.
If you extended it to 4.5 for all 5 years, looking pretty good.
That's another good alternative. Instead of 5, 5, 5, 3, 3, it's 4.5 for 5 years. Does that feel pretty good? Because I'd be happy to bring that back too. Yep. Something about a 0.5 percentage point low is that psychological.
Yeah. And then also it's, where do you want that gap to be, between the two lines? Where are you comfortable with it being? Because it gets closer and closer as you go out.
It does.
Yes.
I don't think that we have any stated policy on where it needs to be above it. It's just we need to stay above it. Okay. So my personal preference is that we would stay a little bit above it and not be just skirting it all the time. Sue's got what's going on?
We're just conversing on the policy regarding our capital reserves, and the minimum is 2.5 years of replacement. And we actually have a maximum of 6 years of replacement. So I don't think we've ever been close to that.
Yeah, I based on our modeling here, I don't think we'll get close to 6 years. Nor would I propose that. Although it would be nice to have a growing piggy bank that would keep our replacement costs, our rates down in the future when the AC main needs to be replaced. But we're not to the point right now where I'm willing to even suggest that as anything for a policy goes. But it's something we will be looking at over the next couple of years. So 4.5 for 5 years. Yeah, it looks like that is going to work fairly well. So I think we'll go back and make sure we haven't missed anything on that and see if we can make that real. Thank you for that suggestion, Nicole. So we are back in water now. Okay, and we're taking the nosedive.
Yeah.
That's the other nice thing about this. She can, with a very click, just a simple click, and turn on all the information so you can see how it affects you. So we had proposed what rate? 6?
We had proposed a 6 for 5.
6 for 5. This one's a little bit more difficult unless you want to go higher in the first couple of years and then reduce it after that. But You're looking at 6% for 5 years. It gets us to 2035, where then there's a nosedive in 2035, but let's worry about 2035 in the future. But you can see that when you look at the percent, though, I want you to think about how much does that mean on a monthly basis? And how much was it, 6% for water? Dollar what?
$2, $2.50.
$2 to $2.50.
Oh, no, water.
Oh, it's water.
$1.
$1 a month more.
$1.05 up to $1.
Yeah,
Sorry, $1.05 per month
to
to
$1.25.
$1.25 by the time you get into the later years.
So this is why we wanted to share the actual impact, because percentages always look scary, but 6% of a dime is a lot different than 6% of $100, but they're still the same percentage. So when we give percentages, I always want to tell you, but what does that equate to? What does it mean? How much money are you taking out of my pocket, if you will, if you're a citizen? And I would like to remind everybody who's watching this that we're not taking out of your pocket. We're using this to make sure you have clean, healthy, potable water, and that we take your waste product and we deal with it appropriately. So we are giving you a service that I think is well worth the money, personally. So we got 6%. Does anybody want to throw a starting number out there?
Let's try a 5.5%. I like playing with the half percentages.
Still doable, but still has a significant drop in 2035. The one thing I want to, as we're doing this, I want to remind you that when we lower the percentage rates earlier on, because you got the compounding effect, that means that when you're getting closer to the point where you're diving off the cliff, you have to have a bigger increase. So thinking about it, if you do the 5.5%, yes, it is perfectly good for 5 years. If everything works out according to this projection in 2034, let's say we have another 5.5%. Another 5.5. Now in 2036, let's just take out, or 37, yeah, just take them out. Okay, so it shows that we don't have enough capital for those outer years to accurately reflect where we are. But if you believe this, it would tell us that we would need a rate increase of about 5% every year. And if you think about it, it's not unreasonable, because the 3% we estimated is for inflation only. If we have a cyclical inflation rates like we've seen over the last 10 years, if we have a year that's 8% or 7%, that's anything that's above our utility rate increase, that means from that point on, we're losing money every year on what we can do with the rates that we have coming in. Why we are where we are, going back to when we first started talking, the utility rates have not been adjusted appropriately for a number of years. So you reach the point where all of a sudden everything's fallen off a cliff. We looked at, can we stop doing capital? The answer is no. We've reached that period of time where we have to do the capital to keep the system up, either from growth or for replacement or just antiquated equipment, materials, trucks, etc. So we're through the honeymoon period. We're now into the hard decision period, which is now we need to start replacing stuff. And that's where you have to have the revenues to do it. So the 4.5, the 5.5, they will work. They will work. But I just want to remind you that the lower the rates that you adopt early on, the bigger the rate increases that are likely going to be happening later on. So setting a good solid foundation for uniform rate increases through time. My utility director in Bellevue, she was insistent that all three of the utilities got a 6% rate increase every year. And she got it. Personally, I thought it was kind of hard for me to understand at that point, but now I understand it. We also have to think about the fact that when we're looking at our costs aren't going up just by inflation. Our costs are driven by salary increases, position increases, position additions to the utilities in order to continue to operate the systems. New systems take a little bit, not much more, but older systems take a lot more time and effort, and therefore you have to have higher capital. So it's a bit of a balance. I think we could certainly go with 4.5 and 5.5. Especially the 4.5 for 5 years versus 5, 3, and 3. I think we can make that work very well. It doesn't seem to affect us much. Looking at this one, 5.5 would work too. but it would necessitate a continuing longer term set of rates with information we have at hand.
So it looks like your biggest variables are, you don't know what's going to happen with capital expansion necessarily or inflation. And then, I know, even as a utility, you don't know what's going to happen with all the uncertainty that's going on right now with tariffs and such. It's like, look what we had to deal with trying to get transformers. You're having supply issues. And so you'll keep, how often will you be working this model? Are you looking at doing it like every 6 months just to kind of track where you're at, or annually?
This is where I give you an answer and Amy pokes me. Internally, what I would like to do is have us input the information, at least on a quarterly basis, of expenditures made. And definitely as we're moving through our capital work, that will probably be annually on the capital side, so that we'll be able to keep up. This is not something I want to set aside and come back once a year to. This is something I would like us to be able to keep up. So internally, we know where we are on our cash position. And if we have changes to projects that cost more or cost less, I want to be able to put that in and see what that means to us long term. So it's a living document.
Had a quick question about, you mentioned like the cyclical inflation rates, right? And so I was really curious, because this can take the historical data. So hypothetically, the longer we use it, the more history we have, which then we can better predict the future.
Yeah.
Fingers crossed.
So let me just show you kind of what this looks like. So these are our operating costs that have been loaded, and everything that is in the yellow columns. I scroll to some operating costs that have stuff in there. This is the actual data out of our system. And then we have elected an inflation rate of 3%. So starting in 26, when it changes to blue, that's actually applied inflation. So it's taking our 25 numbers, applying inflation as far out as we ask it to go. And so it does that. It does the inflation portion this way for the expense. But that rate portion that we just looked at, that's how we make our revenue go up. There's no inflation portion to it. Yeah.
Our biggest risk is that our estimate of inflation is wrong. I'm not too worried about inflation falling below 3% very often. I am worried about inflation exceeding 3%. I think right now we're at 4.4% for the year. And that bites into our ability to perform our functions. And because it's a compounding effect, 4% this year, well, we lost 1%. 4% next year, now we lost an additional 1%. So it's not just 1%, it's an additional compounds. So the more we underestimate inflation versus the reality of it, the more it bites into whatever cash position we're at. So that's why having a little bit more of a rate increase up front is actually better, because it gives us that cushion from the unknowns, and that being the primarily, in my mind, inflationary costs, because it affects everything we do, just like everybody else.
Paul and Amy, it seems like we the black line crosses a red line typically when the green expenses go up. Like, so have you talked about like what is that what's the big expense that year that's cut?
Yeah, we've talked about every project in every year. Okay. And that's part of the reason why we're only looking at 5 years, because we know that those outer years,
right,
we had to put the project in when we think it will likely happen. However, it is so far as 10 years out.
Right.
And some of them have some squish, if you will, on their timing, as well as the cost of them. But all their costs are inflated from 2025 to that year at 3% increase every year. So that's why my goal is that we look at this and bring it back annually. I mean, it doesn't have to be a big work session. It can be just a simple report out that we've looked at the rates and here's where we are on our cash position, et cetera. And that's all you would hear from us that year. If it looked like that there was a real big cost increases because of inflation, then we would sit down and we would talk to the council about if we needed to have an additional bump, like a one-time bump, and how that would affect our cash position moving forward. So with that being said, are you still comfortable with the 4.5 and 5.5? or would you prefer that we go back and revisit a little bit? I'm okay either way, to be frank, based on the analysis that we're seeing here. I think either one would work for us, at least for the 5 years. And I really am not too worried about what's going on in 2035 and 2036. I just want to make sure that we're okay for at least 5. I prefer 5 to 10 years projection, 5 years for sure. Every year we're going to do a reassessment that'll give us our window moving forward again.
And I think originally the work session was just for general information and education about how all of this works. But the more they developed this and got close to and utilizing the full functionality and sophistication of the program, and in talking with Sue, the work session turned into kind of give us your nod so that when Sue starts building the budget in the next month or two, that you're not seeing this for the first time and then having to change it. If we have a conversation now, those numbers will be built, whatever you choose will be built into the budget, and you won't have to have that same conversation in September, October. So that's why he says if you're comfortable with that, what that means is Sue will probably just go ahead and drop that in unless something dramatic happens between now and then. That's probably what you'll see.
Yeah, actually, a little bit more than that is based on the conversation tonight, we are going to bring forward a draft ordinance at the next council meeting, and we'll have the draft proposal for the GFCs, the water and the sewer rate increases. From that, we'll request that the next meeting be a public hearing on those rates. And then based on what we hear out of all that, then we'll have the final ordinance we'll bring forward. This is a discussion. You are not making a decision tonight. I'll make it really clear so nobody's confused about this. This is a work session, in my mind, discussion to get a flavor from you where you think you might be. And now that we know there are slight tweaks we can make to this, and we'll move forward and come forward with a draft ordinance for your consideration at the next council meeting.
I guess my only feedback would be, just personally, I'm not a big fan of huge hikes
Neither am I.
and then lowering. And so if we could have options where it's like a consistent, stable increase is nice.
Thank you. Kelly, you had a comment?
I was just going to ask you to plug in the 6% again, whatever you guys recommended.
I think we were at, was it 6 across the board for 5 years? Yeah. So if there was uniformity of 6%, you can see that we never crossed the red line. Again, we're only going to look at 5 years, and these numbers are just to give you a sense. If everything was perfect and came out the way we anticipated, this is what it would do. And whenever I see like in 2036, I think it's skyrocketing, just ignore that, because that means we don't have our capital loaded up in that for those outer years. And we'll be doing that. I fully expect we're going to have capital.
And for clarity, this is still the water side.
Correct.
Correct.
Yeah.
Thanks.
You're welcome. All right.
And I would say also for reference that one of the last slides before they got into the actual program and started doing these scenarios with you all was the combination of water and sewer with their suggested increases, and compared those to our neighboring contiguous cities, and we were still like way down. So you almost have to think back to that or refer back to that slide to see what the real effect would be relative to our neighbors on the peninsula.
Thank you, Matt. That's very appropriate. The other thing I'll just put out there is a little more cash position gives us a little more flexibility to look for new and innovative things and things that we would like to do. I would like to be able to hire a consultant to do a I&I study to tell us how much I&I we have on the sewer side, and therefore, is it something we need to worry about? On the water side, I would like to hire expertise to come in and do a conditional assessment of all of our AC mains, or at least the majority of the big ones. Neither one of those are cheap. One firm that will come in and do our leaky, I'll call it leaky, the rainy well right? It's 11,000 feet of, I think it's, John, is it 10 or 12-inch line? 12-inch line. AC, it's 70 years old. That's right now it's our primary water source coming into the city. So I really want to do an assessment of that 11,000 plus feet of AC pipe and find out how much life it has remaining in it, because replacing that is going to be very expensive. Well, the assessment's $85,000 to go do that. To me, that's an investment well worth it. And then we have other pipes. I would like to know generally, are all of our 8-inch lines in good shape? Our 10-inch lines, our 6-inch lines, are they in good shape? Can we start programming them many years out? That takes initial cost to do that. So if our cash position is looking okay, then we have the flexibility to draw upon that. Of course, it always comes through the council for budget, but it gives us the ability to do that without worrying about it becoming a rate driver by itself, which is why keeping that gap, perhaps 2032 and 33 might be too big of a gap just for that. But if you look a little further down in time, that gap goes away because it means we've used those resources. So don't know if that helps or just confuses you, but basically a little more cash in the pocket is better. It gives us more flexibility to do things that we would like to be able to do in the future. Well, I think we've run through everything tonight. Thank you for your patience and your attention, and definitely with, having a little bit of fun with the tool that we have here and seeing how it does actually affect things. We've spent an awful lot of time trying to perfect it as best we can with the information at hand. I hope you can see the level of work that went into that. And I want to give Amy massive kudos for helping us through this whole thing, because she was the one with the consultant and with finance putting this tool to right. And she spent an awful lot of time on this, and this is what we're relying on. And I know that all of us, the rest of us sitting at the table, really appreciate that. And everybody who pays their rates may not appreciate the rate increase, but they should appreciate the fact that that level of detail went into putting together a tool that will enable us to give them the right service at the right time for the right price.
And I might just extend the invitation to council. This is first time seeing a lot of this, and sometimes after a night or two of sleeping on it, you want to adjust or ask some more questions. We've got a couple weeks before we come back and meet again, and these folks can answer your questions one-on-one with anything you have. So don't hesitate to ask further questions should you have them.
Thank you for your attention tonight. I know that rate increases are never anything anybody wants to tackle, but they're a necessary part of our life. And I really do appreciate you taking the time out of your days to sit through this with us and pay attention and ask the good questions. So as Matt said, we're available to answer any questions at any time. But we do intend on bringing something before the full council 2 weeks from tonight. And look at that, it's 5/22/23, and I told Matt we'd be done by 5:30. Thank you again.
Thank you.
All right, we will be back at 6 o'clock. Thank you.
All right, go ahead and call this meeting of the Sequim City Council to order. If everybody will please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance.
United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
And if the city clerk could please take roll call.
Counselor Kelly Berger,
Present.
Counselor Vicky Lowe,
Present.
Deputy Mayor Rachel Anderson,
Present.
Mayor Brandon Janice,
Present.
Counselor Harmony Redder,
Here.
Counselor Nicole Hartman.
Here.
And if there's a motion to excuse Counselor Butler,
So moved.
And seconded.
any opposed? If not, he is excused. All right. Approval of the final agenda. Any changes? Do have one, if anybody has an issue with it, just to mix things up. Just want to move reports up tonight. If anybody has an issue with that, to right after public comment. Anybody have a problem with that tonight? Mix things up a little bit. All right, any opposed to that? All right, so then we'll go ahead and move reports up. Moving on to ceremony, we got a couple proclamations tonight. All right, this first one is for Juneteenth. And whereas the Emancipation Proclamation signed January 1st, 1863 by President Lincoln declared all people held as slaves in the Confederate States and henceforward shall be free. And whereas Juneteenth marks the day in 1865, over 2 years after the Emancipation Proclamation was issued, when Major General Gordon Granger officially announced the Emancipation Proclamation to the enslaved people in Galveston, Texas. And whereas since June 19th, 1866, Juneteenth has been celebrated, spreading across the state of Texas until it was declared a state holiday in 1980. And shortly after, other states began celebrating. And whereas officially known as Juneteenth National Independence Day, Juneteenth became a federal holiday on June 17th, 2021, when President Joe Biden signed it into law after bipartisan support in Congress. And whereas this holiday recognizes the history of our country, is an opportunity to celebrate human freedom, reflect on the grievous and ongoing legacy of slavery, and rededicate ourselves to rooting out systematic racism that continues to plague our society as we strive to deliver the full promise of freedom and equality for all Americans. And now, therefore, I, Brandon Janice, Mayor of the City of Sequim, and on behalf of the City Council, do hereby proclaim June 19th, 2025 as Juneteenth, and urge citizens to recommit to the work of equality, equity, and justice, reminding us all of the centuries of struggle, courage, and hope that have brought us to this time of progress and possibility, and ensure that the events of 1865 are not forgotten. Signed on this 9th day of June, 2025, Brandon Janice, Mayor. Does anybody have any comments on council?
Thank you so much, Brandon, for reading this proclamation and signing it on behalf of council.
All right, and the second one will be for Pride Month. And whereas the month of June is chosen as Pride Month across the nation in commemoration of the Stonewall protests against the violence and marginalization faced by the two-spirit, lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, queer questioning, intersex, and asexual, two SLGBTQA plus persons in June 1969 at Stonewall Inn in New York, and the resulting civil rights movement for two SLGBTQA plus rights since then. And whereas the governor of Washington State proclaimed in the month of June 2025 Pride Month, and whereas every individual is equal before and under the law and has the right to equal protection and equal benefit of the law without discrimination based on race, national or ethnic origin, color, religion, sex, age, or mental or physical disability. And whereas showing our support for the 2SLGBTQA plus AI plus community, we are supporting their right to equal protection under the law. And whereas courageous 2SLGBTQAI plus Americans, including the Sequim community members, continue to inspire and bring hope to all people seeking a life true to who they are. And whereas 2SLGBTQAI plus people also continue to enrich every aspect of American life as educators, entertainers, entrepreneurs, athletes, actors, artists, scientists, scholars, doctors, veterans, and more. Now, therefore, I, Brandon Janice, Mayor of the City of Sequim, and on behalf of the City Council, hereby recognize June 2025 as Pride Month and celebrate the courage and contributions of 2SLGBTQAI plus community members. And we reflect on the progress we have made so far in pursuit of equality, justice, and inclusion. We commit ourselves to doing more in support of 2SLGBTQAI plus rights and invite community members to show their support of our 2SLGBTQAI plus community members every day and by participating in Pride events to be held on Saturday, June 28th in the City of Sequim. Signed on this 9th day of June 2025, Brandon Janice, Mayor. Any comments by council?
Thank you. Excuse me. Thank you. I think this is our third year for Pride? Fifth year? Wow. So I hope that people join us here out in the Civic Plaza on the 28th. I think it starts with the market, the Saturday market, and goes through till 2 o'clock.
All right. Anybody else? All right. Moving on to public comment, and there was nobody signed up, correct?
There's no public comment.
All right. Moving on to reports. Student liaison.
Sorry about that. The mic was far away. First thing is the school board has found our new junior representative. Her name is Cassie Montero. I had the pleasure of being one of the people who were part of the interview process. She had a great energy, and I look forward to being able to work with her on the school board. And I wouldn't be surprised if come September she applies to be on this board. Secondly, we had on the 3rd of last week, we had our last choir concert, which I heard went very well. Our choir team had a great season, and tomorrow will be enjoying their banquet, and they're looking forward to that. Our seniors graduated last Friday on the 6th, and today our boys soccer team is having their banquet. They're celebrating their co-MVPs, Nico Mosso and Nolan Valenzuela. Nolan will be going on to play PC at PC next year. And for every student who is not a senior, school is ending this Thursday on the 12th, and it'll be a half day, and everyone's looking forward to it. That is all.
All right, thank you. City Manager.
Thank you. Nice to meet with you, council members. Beautiful evening. So I just want to highlight 5 or 6 things. As you remember, DeVore, our lobbyist, attended work session, or anyway, gave you an update. We have decided, as he suggested, to circle our wagons and not wait for 6 years to try again at the SIMDAR's monies, SIMDAR's money and project that we got put off on. Anyway, long story short, we've had several meetings, internal meetings, and we'll be inviting all the parties interested and invested in that in the next couple of weeks here. And Devor's going to be here and have a full agenda to try to keep that moving forward and to get that back on track. So just wanted to let you know that that's still really important to us. And we were told by him that if we reconvene and reload, that we can probably get back on in the interim. So anyway, that's the idea. Anyway, I also wanted to let you all know that Friday we heard back from the hearing examiner, and the workforce housing project that went to them a couple weeks ago came back with a positive review, and so that's moving forward. I know you all have had interest in that. I wanted to also let you know that our IT director, Oleg, I've asked him to really take cybersecurity serious and to make sure it's our number one priority going forward. And a part of that, a small part, but an important part, typically our firewalls get penetrated by staff opening way, but it's just staff not paying attention to what they click on. So there's, you've probably heard about, there's a lot of vendors that it's kind of like a secret shopper. They send emails out and you're supposed to catch those. And if you don't, are reminded that you just got phished, and it will tell you how to not do that again. It will give you a 1 or 2 minute video about that. Anyway, and I assume you all will want to participate in that. It's pretty much anybody that has a city email. It's, no penalties, no enforcement, but it's an education process to try to get all 100 of all of us to pay more attention to what we're doing in our inbox. So happy to announce that we're moving forward with a company called Fish Firewall. And also, Oleg, I think some of you had an interest in this as well. Certainly some of our staff did. Those that aren't familiar with the Android phone get frustrated with it, and have always been asking ever since I've been here, can we ever get to an Apple product? And he's been testing that out for a couple of weeks now, and so it looks like almost any time going forward, folks will be able to have their choice of whatever device they are handy with and find useful. So that's a big step forward as well. I want to thank our legal department, and particularly Talina, for a successful risk management meeting. We have quarterly meetings. We track all of our risks in 3 different buckets, from personal injury to whatever their property, and then to lawsuits or torts, I guess they're called. And anyway, we trend it all, and we put action plans around any information and trends that we see. So just want you to know that we take all of those things very seriously and manage those on a quarterly basis. So thank you to Talina for being our risk coordinator. John wanted me, Mike's still out of town, but John wanted me to let you know that we do have a new officer that started last week, and 4 others in active training. I've met with all those, and we've really got a nice young group of professionals in our police department. And Sherry Crane, did I mention this last time? Sherry Crane accepted the position as our emergency management coordinator. It's a part-time thing. She just loves emergency management. She loves not being responsible for the whole department, and she started last week with us as well. So we've come a long way since her retirement a 1.5 years ago, and she's thrilled to keep the traction going. So finally, just a couple last things. We did receive 3 new portable radar speed signs. I know all of you have been interested in us trying to control that per your constituents' input to you. And we will be deploying those and getting those set up in the areas that we know to be sensitive. And then also on Friday, Public Works met here to open bids for the Gearhart building, and nobody bid for them. So we're going to have to go back and I guess I got to ask Paul what's Plan B, but I know we're kind of thinking that through now. What so. We tried and had multiple weeks of open houses there and staff there to answer questions and take people on tours and whatnot. And so that was a long shot to hope that someone would take that off our hands, but they didn't. So we'll let you know how that goes. Any questions, Council? Thank you.
All right, Council reports.
I have Councillor Butler's report from the Healing Clinic. I believe everyone received a copy of it. Let's see. The Jamestown Healing Clinic Advisory Board meets quarterly under the direction of CEO D. Brent Simkowski. We review the quarterly statistics and discuss future plans with opportunities for expanded services and challenges the clinic faces. A brief review of the 2025 quarter two statistics: 137 male patients, 148 female patients. 90% are Clallam County residents, 9% Jefferson County, and 1% other. The other category are primarily, patients receiving treatment in other locations and temporarily visiting Clallam County. They come to the clinic to maintain their treatment while away from home. July 6th will be the third anniversary of the clinic opening. The clinic has added dental services as part of the wraparound care and have treated 231 patients. The prescriptions of opioids for dental pain is a significant factor in ongoing addiction. The Jamestown Tribe contributed $100,000 to the Peninsula Behavioral Health to continue the social services navigator position for the next year. This position was mandated for the first 3 years of the clinic's operation and has proven to be very successful and beneficial to our community. Sequim Police and Clallam County Fire District 3 both expressed their appreciation for the resource this position provides to them as they respond to calls in our community. The current federal proposed legislation regarding budget cuts, especially to Medicare, is a deep concern for the clinic. The inpatient facility is currently being constructed on land adjacent to the healing clinic and is on schedule. This 16-bed facility will be a significant relief to the load currently carried by the OMC emergency room staff and the Clallam County jail staff. Respectfully submitted by Dan Butler.
Any other reports? All right, moving on. Consent agenda.
Claim vouchers totaling $1,231,658.10. The City Council minutes from the May 27th, 2025 meeting. Ratification of the AT&T cell tower lease at Carrie Blake Park. The LTAC minutes and grants. And finally, Planning Commission appointment resolution.
I'm ready to make a motion. I move to approve the consent agenda.
Second.
Moving and seconded. Anything further? Any opposed? I'm seeing none. That motion will pass. All right. First up tonight will be Transportation Improvement Plan. This will be a first touch. Nick?
Good evening, Council. For the record, Nick Dosty, City Engineer, Deputy Director of Public Works. So tonight, I have first touch of our Transportation Improvement Program. I'd like to start off just by saying that in concurrence with our comp plan, the transportation master plan is being updated. And so around this time next year, I would expect some shuffling based on our land use capacity, based on the improvements we are doing this year and proposed and funded for next year. So this is a dynamic document. You can see that there's quite a few projects in the 2031 plus column. As long as the project is on the TIP, we have the ability to look to fund it and pull it into sooner years in the usual 6-year timeline. It's not quite like the CIP because the TIP translates into the regional program and the state program. And so this is a little bit more comprehensive in the fact that if you see the project listed on here, we are in fact looking for funding at any given time as things open. So I'd just like to start off with that. Before diving into the program, I'd like to briefly go over some wins we had last year as far as projects and completions. Pretty significant is our North Sequim Ave pedestrian bike project and our North Sequim Ave overlay. These two projects together now offer brand new street from Washington all the way to Port Williams / Old Olympic Highway, brand new roundabout, bike access along that same corridor on both sides, and pedestrian access along that same corridor on both sides, along with street lighting. So previously, when there's an example of a complete corridor, you could look to West Fur as a pretty major project. Now you can look to the whole corridor of North Sequim Avenue as an example of what a complete corridor looks like. Now, granted, there's you can kind of track the improvements based on time because it is a larger stretch. Some places have sidewalk adjacent to curb, some have landscape, but we're very proud to have that corridor in the state that it is, in the condition that it is now, being able to move on to other collectors throughout the city. So I just wanted to bring your attention to those two projects. As far as planning goes, last year we were able to complete our local road safety plan, which analyzes crash data that is reported to WashDOT by local law enforcement. It's analysis of 5 years of data that then gets translated into safety projects. This local road safety plan plays into our comprehensive safety action plan, which opens up the opportunity for us to apply for Safe Streets for All federal grant funding. So taking the local road safety plan and developing it into the comprehensive safety action plan requires two additional things. It requires an equity analysis and it requires public outreach. So both of those things were the focus last year to get our comprehensive safety action plan to where it is. And that has allowed us now to apply for our North 3rd Ave Complete Streets project that you see on this TIP. And that is the first step or the first phase in completing that 3rd Avenue corridor, getting multimodal and pedestrian and street lights safety improvements along that corridor, basically from South City limits all the way continued on to our school campus. So we're pretty excited to have the comprehensive safety action plan done. We are one of very few jurisdictions in the state that actually used our own funding to get this plan put together. So we're ahead of the curve when it comes to applying for Safe Streets for All. A lot of people are applying for planning funding and then following up with the demonstration funding, meaning they're applying for funding to do their comprehensive safety action plan and then saying, yep, you guys can help us fund that. And also you'll help fund the projects that safety action plan details. We've already got that taken care of. They know what projects we want to do. We have the 3rd Ave concept and concept design and estimate to get design and construction done. So we're feeling very confident going into this Safe Streets for All application. And we're coordinating right now with TIB and also coming up with Plan B should we not score high enough to put the same application in for safe routes to schools in the next funding cycle. So we're really looking forward to getting this project up and running, and we feel like we have a pretty solid plan to address that. So jumping into our transportation improvement program here, focusing really on the planning or the implementation years 26, 27. I would first like to call out conveniently projects 1 and 2. You can see these are 2 citywide projects and they're pavement preservation projects. Previously, the city maintained 1 citywide pavement preservation project on our TIP and our CIP. This was to do rehabilitation capital projects across all the streets in our city, collectors, arterials, neighborhood, local. But as we started going through our CIP, as we started going through our TIP, we heard, and actually the public outreach for our safety action plan, why is so much attention being put towards Washington, towards North Sequim Ave, right? They are our arterials or collectors, and so they do get a lot of traffic. But like I said, our maintenance crews and the public were asking us, why are our local roads being ignored? So hearing that, sitting down with our design team and our analyst team, we came up with this outline here. So we have 2 pavement rehab categories. We have arterials and collectors, and then we have our local. And you can see that one is significantly less in the planning years, 26, 27, 28, than the other. What that means and how we're framing it right now is the arterial and collector money, that is city money, we are using that to match for federal dollars, meaning that the $123,000 scheduled for 2026 could turn into, based on the percent match, anywhere from $400,000 to $600,000 to do arterials and collectors. The 309, 318, 328,000 you see for local streets, that is all city funded. So that gives us the opportunity to pursue other maintenance and capital projects such as chip seal, slurry seal, potholing, dig outs, things like that for our local neighborhood streets, so we can get more life out of those and improve those for our residents and be able to shift a little focus financially and time-wise away from our collectors and address those issues people are having in their neighborhoods. So we're really excited to have this split. The federal funding, the STBG funds I mentioned, we've pretty consistently got those the past 2 or 3 years. Just as an example, we brought just 2 projects to you, totaling just under 1.5 million, I believe, to redo Priest Road and to overlay Washington from 7th to 9th or 9th to 7th, depending on which way you're driving. And so that was done with that match money. So we're really looking forward to being able to go out to the local neighborhoods to show people that we are paying attention to what you're saying, and we are listening and wanting to provide you the streets that you're looking for. The other project I'd like to bring attention to, just briefly, is number 15, the North Sequim Ave Complete Street. So that is our federal project that we're applying for. Will include multimodal improvements, pedestrian improvements, streetlight improvements. And again, that is phase 1 in a multi-phase series of projects to improve that 3rd Ave corridor to our school campus at the heart of our city. The next project I'd like to highlight here is project number 52, slated for 2027. I'd like to point this out. It's the West Brownfield Road alignment, Sequim Ave to 3rd Ave. So this stretch of street got some attention due to the Bell Creek hearing examiner with concerns about the alignment, site distance, flooding. In response to that concern and ongoing input from the public, we have codified a new route to allow the city to better improve existing infrastructure when developers come in, known as the fee in lieu code that we've just passed. So the money you see on here is the anticipated money we will receive for that fee in lieu. What we can do with that fee in lieu money now is use that to purchase additional right-of-way opposite of the development, because the development is only required to improve half of the existing right-of-way. So we'll purchase the right-of-way on the opposite side. We'll be able to use the remaining funding to either do a design for a application for a loan or use the existing money as a match for federal funding to improve the whole corridor. Either way, once we receive that fee in lieu money, we have 5 years to spend that money. So the clock is ticking to get that safety improvement done. So I just wanted to point that out because again, we've got input from the public. We're looking for other ways to fund the projects that we see for existing infrastructure that need improvement. And this is one alley that we're pursuing and seeing success in. So I anticipate this fee in lieu lane to be, no pun intended there, to be taken by developers and for the city to be able to better take advantage of developer money to improve the whole corridor instead of just half. From there, I'd like to point out number 59. And this is our systemic signalized intersection and pedestrian safety improvements. This is funding we have right now, and we are currently drafting an RFQ. These are signal improvements for Sequim, 3rd, and 5th. They are cabinet improvements and they are pedestrian improvements. And this is another step in the direction to be able to, especially for 3rd and 5th at this point in time, set us up to do infrastructure and hardware upgrades for the arrows that people are wanting to see at 3rd and 5th. So that's the next step. So something I'd like to bring up on the signals that hasn't explicitly been said, that has exposed itself as we dove further into looking at what we presented at the work session, because we not only looked at the utilities to present, but also the streets aspect. And where we find ourselves with how we fund streets and the funding available to us is for larger projects for transportation running into an issue of match. Right. So when we try to scope a project, not only do we need to understand, okay, what is the debt capacity that we can take on from a project, but what can we afford to match up front without completely cleaning out our account to be able to safely provide a cash flow to do the project. So that's just another challenge when we're dealing with transportation and safety projects. There's a lot of competition. So being able to make an application affordable for us, but attractive to the funding source that we're trying to swoon, for lack of a better term, it's been an interesting challenge. We're getting a lot of help from our consultant. These action plans, the local road safety plan and comprehensive safety action plan, are great tools. So that way we can set ourselves up and show agencies like we have a plan. You can see it on paper. We just need the money to move forward. So that's just a continued plug for that signal project. And the last one is again another contract that we've brought to City Council for approval, and we should be kicking off here probably in the next 4 to 6 weeks, is our citywide pedestrian and bike improvement project number 67 here. You can see there's very low amounts in here. Again, that's by design to pursue match funding. So our 150,000 that we had last year for TIB funding gave us access to $705,000 for a total of, I believe, 810, if I did the math right on that. So $810,000 to replace 61 ADA ramps in the city. So that chips away at that ADA transition project list. And again, trying to be more effective and a little bit smarter with how we use city money to access the larger pools of money. And then by doing that, funneling the extra funding into that local road pavement rehab so we can focus on neighborhood roads and improvements there to the streets and sidewalks. So that's just a brief, what have we been up to as far as last year and what to look forward to in 26, 27. More than happy to answer any questions.
Question. Going back to project number 52, the Brownfield Road realignment piece. At this point, if you had to make a wild guess, how would you say the building, so the construction of the project and the road realignment are going to be moving together kind of in tandem so that folks aren't already living in that community before the road gets realigned? Do you have some idea of how that might unfold?
So just so I understand your question completely, is the question, will the realignment and reconstruction of the road, which is a city project, align with the construction of the development Bell Creek?
Right. Will people already be living in the Bell Creek space before the road gets realigned, or is it hopeful? I'm sorry, allergies. That ideally it would be that the realignment is happening before people are actually living there, or kind of in tandem with it, I suppose.
Yeah. So if we're talking ideals, then ideally, we would put our project out for advertisement after the developer breaks ground. That puts the city in a position to have cost savings because whoever's doing the development has the equipment on site to do the similar work that they're already doing. So at this point, that's the best timeline I can give with any confidence. Now, when you're talking completion or anything like that, that comes down to whether or not we get the same contractor as the developer or it's a different contractor. Depends on the market. I know Rolling Hills built very fast. I don't know if they'll match that on Bell Creek. So there's a lot of variables to go any deeper than general planning about when we would want to release our project to get the best bang for our buck.
Great. Thank you very much for that.
I don't have any questions, but thank you. I really appreciate the use of our funds to leverage grant funding. That's very smart.
There's no further questions. There is a motion.
I move to direct staff to prepare a resolution and schedule a public hearing on this matter in the regular manner at the next city council meeting.
I'll second that.
And seconded. Anything further? Any opposed? If none, that motion will pass. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, moving on. Scrib Municipal Code 2.36 Planning Commission Code Update. This is Second Touch. Christina.
Good afternoon, Council. As the mayor just indicated that this is your second touch on this matter. And as you may recall, the reason why this has been brought back for second touch is because there was some discussion about wanting to add some language in there that would allow the Planning Commission to bring forward other items that may not necessarily have been directed by council or brought forward by staff. And so as explained in your packet, the mayor and I had some discussion, or he provided me with a draft language proposal. We went and subsequently took that proposal to the Planning Commission, and they instead indicated that they would be happy with the language that is before you this evening in 2.36050. And that is the only thing in this draft that has changed. And so with that, I am here to answer any questions that you may have. And if council has no further questions or discussion or wishes to amend anything on this, I would look forward to a motion for adoption. Thanks.
When I was reading through this, the option 2 in our agenda cover sheet here sounded fairly similar to how things go with the Arts Commission, where they do a strat plan. A strategic planning session, and work through, just do an open brainstorm. Here's all these cool ideas. Let's put Post-it notes up on the board. And then as part of that process, it's facilitated by a staff member. And then in the conversation back and forth, you're like, oh yeah, we're already going to do this. We're already doing that. Oh, and then you can also whittle it down to a more manageable list. And then those items it's a very intentional process for cultivating that, creative side, daydreaming brainstorming, like those big ideas, and then making it tangible so that staff can further research it. That's what option 2 sounded like to me. I would, venture to say that in my perspective, I think it's working well for the Arts Commission. And perhaps the Planning Commission didn't have such a mechanism before. So that, I imagine that's what this conversation is leading towards. And hopefully it works well for them. That's where I'm going to stop right there.
If I may, council. So I think one of the big differences that it's important for council to remember is that the Arts Commission does not have any state mandated jobs. Right. The Planning Commission has the state mandated jobs of reviewing development regulations, of reviewing comprehensive plan, of all of those other types of things. And so that was a significant aspect of what the Planning Commission discussed. They were aware, they were appreciative of council's concern and consideration. They were also appreciative of understanding that there should be some guardrails on this as well. And it was at their request, and I think, Nicole, you may have been attending at that, so if I misstate, please feel free to correct me. But it was at their suggestion that we put the word may in there, because as an example, that this year, it's going to be comprehensive plan. They don't know that they have the time or the willingness or the capacity to address anything else. And, assuming that this passes tonight, that we're actually going to be having that conversation with the commission, probably at next meeting to see if they want to do this. Because as we've talked about, the comprehensive plan is expected to take through roughly June of 2026, which could theoretically give them a half of year. But I can assure you that their time is going to be taken up looking at other portions of the development regulations associated with that. So while I appreciate the position that you're coming from, I would say that the Arts Commission and the Planning Commission have very different roles.
Thank you for that perspective. I just an observation as I read through option 2, I said, this sounds like a strategic plan, like the way Arts Commission does it. But yeah, clearly different purposes for different committees and commissions. And thank you.
I think from what I heard, it just sounds like they want to be able to include language so that they have the opportunity, but it keeps the guardrails in there so that it doesn't end up monopolizing staff time and put some boundaries on it.
And as discussed during that meeting, they had indicated that they have not had work plans for a few years now. And so by codifying that, that gives them the opportunity to say, hey, when are we doing our comp plan? Because now they've got the ability, or I'm sorry, not comp plan, our work plan, because now per code, it needs to be, there needs to be a decision on that by the end of July every year.
There's nothing further. There's a motion.
I move to direct staff to present an ordinance at the next available meeting adopting the proposed amendment to SMC 2.36 Planning Commission.
I'll second that.
And seconded, anything further from council? Any opposed? All right, seeing none, that motion will pass.
Thank you, Council. On behalf of the Commission, they certainly appreciated your time and attention to this matter, and they also appreciate you making these code changes so they can, that allows them to move on with their rules of procedure. So thank you.
All right. Aaron, municipal code funding discussion.
So let me just tee this up for Aaron. We've been working on this, I think the entire time I've been here, 3.5 years, we've been slowly process improving this. Most recently, probably this year, Aaron's been before you. She's kind of the program administrator. But I think we're finally there. You've seen that she's digitized it all. It's all online. We've defined each of the components of it, from the application to the reports to the percentages of dollars that can be spent in for salaries and wages, et cetera. So anyway, there are still a few things that we wanted council to give us some direction on, and we will end with those after we kind of walk you through the program and review it in its entirety. But much like the work session you just went through, you'll see that we're trying to put this in front of council because it has to do with city finances. And we didn't want to have you, as in the past, have to deal with this in the middle of the budget that's already been prepared. So we're just trying to lift it out. And I think Marin will address that as well as one of the main reasons we're here. But I think it allows Sue a lot smoother and you all time to look at this without a formal comprehensive budget in front of you. So with that as a setup, Marin, I'll turn it over to you. Thank you.
Thank you. For the record, Marin Packer, Executive Assistant. And so what I'm going to do today is I'm just going to walk you through kind of what we've done with the municipal funding program. The goal is that this is going to be the final big push to formalize this program. And it does take some council involvement. And so I'm going to walk you through the municipal funding budget process. So what Matt kind of recommended, that we pull this aspect out of the budget book and we address it early. And I'll walk you through why as well. We did add a couple more languages to the guidelines that I'd like to pitch to council and hear your thoughts on. And then I wanted to show you the updated application and reporting requirements. So we really worked hard to make things as easy, but as comprehensive as possible. It's a very short application comparatively. And we spent a lot of time thinking about how it can be effective but simple. And then we'll walk you through the funding trends that we're seeing through our data collection of municipal funding program, the life of it, as well as the past 5 years. And finally, we'll address some policy decisions we're looking for council to make or to provide guidance on. So to get started, we are proposing that rather than in September, when finance delivers the budget book to council, that the municipal funding request review happen in June. As of right now, all requests for funding, their applications are due June 15th of each year. And so this request review would be put on council agenda, or if you wanted to form a subcommittee for the next session after the June 15th deadline. The purpose of this is a funding decision, and so it's something council would need to make, and it helps Sue prepare for the budget to make sure it's accurate by the September delivery. And so you can see there, we're moving it from that September date over to the June date, probably towards the end of the month. Next, some guideline updates. So number one is not an update. These are the 4 areas eligible for funding determined by council. Number one is human services, which is defined as providing aid to the poor and infirm. Number 2 is economic development. We qualify as a underprivileged community, and so we qualify for economic development funding. Number C is minor financial relief during declared emergencies such as COVID-19 pandemic, and D is recreational opportunities. Number 2 is a new concept. We offer 3 funding terms. One-time awards, meaning we pay out a lump sum. The amount has to be under $10,000 as part of the guideline, and so they make the initial purchase, and we fully reimburse them that full lump sum, and that's the one-time payment. 1 year is they are allowed to submit invoices to the city up to quarterly for the duration of a year for the full funding amount. And 2 years is they receive the same funding award each year for 2 years, in which they can pull from through invoicing the city regularly. They are able to select, meaning our applicants, when I say they, the funding term that they prefer. And a thing to note is that applications are not automatically renewed. They are required to reapply after that 1-year term expires or the 2-year term expires. All application deadlines are June 15th. Applications currently are open from January 1st to June 15th, so they do have quite a while to do this. We do this because we encourage our applicants to meet with staff before they submit their application, just to make sure that they're meeting guidelines, that the things that they want to apply for are going to pass our guidelines and our requirements, and that we can ensure the application is going to be correct. And currently, in the past, we have accepted legal applications. We are changing that guideline and asking for council approval to no longer accept late applications past the June 15th deadline. It does put some pressure on our finance director to have to scramble to find some money. And so she likes to have as much time beforehand as possible, which is why we added that caveat. Another new thing is that our reports have unfortunately not been consistent from our applicants, and we still don't have all of the reports from the applicants from the previous year. And so we are requiring now an annual report on a city template that includes an expense report and their invoices. And another new thing is that we were reaching out to each of our applicants and reminding them about the application deadline. We would like to just do one public reminder January 1st, letting them know that the municipal funding program is open for applications January 1st to June 15th each year, rather than reaching out to applicants specifically.
As you may remember, we've sent up to 3 reminders for previous applicants, like begging them to submit, an application to give them money. So we just felt like we need to draw the line somewhere and just make a general one-time announcement.
Yeah, that can be a delicate topic, and so we've gone a little overboard with the reminders, but we feel like we've done enough now that a public reminder will be enough. Yeah, Harmony.
I appreciate that. And I think that it would be important for me, the way I see it. I'd like to suggest that there be kind of a middle ground, that instead of doing individual reminders to those various entities, that reminders be all public, and that there be one on January 1st. There could be one in the middle to say, just the deadline is coming up. Please reach out and make an appointment with staff. And then maybe one final all public reminder that the deadline is or it's June 1st. Your deadline for municipal funding is coming up. Please, this is your time. So I would say that I respect that the individual reminder that's too much. That's too much. But I think there is a middle ground here because we're probably dealing with nonprofits who are under-resourced, and folks who are under-resourced are always scrambling for time and energy. And I think that to transition from what we were doing before to this maybe more nuanced kind of middle of the road approach, I think would make a lot more sense because I think it's just too stark a difference. That's my suggestion. Thank you for hearing me out.
Thank you.
I do like the idea of more than one reminder, but I think one in June is way too late. So maybe one in like January and one in April would be my recommendation. That way it gives staff enough time to be able to meet with people and figure things out.
How do you do the reminders? Like, is it in the paper or?
So we email the applicants individually. So generally we do a templated email. So it's the same language to all applicants. And then I send it to their email addresses that they submitted applications on or have been emailing me back and forth on.
But a public one.
In the past, we're suggesting getting away from that, like you're suggesting, not individual solicitations, but a general announcement.
That would go through Barb, right?
Yes.
So it would go through our city newsletter and be posted on our website.
I'm just hesitant to doing it on the 1st because everybody's probably on holiday and probably just reach more people if we did it maybe like a week later.
Absolutely.
Just a suggestion.
Vicki?
And how it works in other grants is usually people can sign up to receive a notification that you have an email list of people who have asked to be notified. And so it's June 14th.
June 15th.
June 15th it's due and the funding begins.
So the funding begins January 1st of the following year. So if they apply June 15th, 2025, they would receive the funding January 1st, 2026 after our agreement has been finalized. And I work hard with entities November and December after the budget has been approved to get those contracts or those agreements finalized as soon as possible so that they have access to their money pretty close to January 1st.
That's an unusual amount of time between application and funding.
Yeah, unfortunately, that's the way our budget process works. And so the timeline just to get the budget book to council to approve the budget, and then working out the agreements with the entities, it is a process.
Well, I noticed that one of the things that we're talking about is to approve a funding cap of 1.5 of the general fund. So does the budget actually have to know exactly who these funds are being paid out to in order to be completed? Because how it works in the rest of the world is an amount is said, you say you have this much funds to do this work, and then that's in your budget, and then the applications go out and then people apply.
Yeah. We can go through the funding cap and have time for Q&A. I do want to make sure that we get to the full presentation because I feel like there's some data and information in here that may help answer some questions, including our idea for reviewing these funding applications. And a lot of that is up to council determinations, which could potentially influence the timeline. So I apologize. Is there any questions or should I keep? Okay. So those are the guidelines, including the new elements that we have introduced with numbers 5, 6, and 7. As far as the application, we have 4 sections in our application. We're really only asking one narrative question, which is to describe their organization and project, which is section 2, subsection A. And otherwise, we want to know data and statistics, the amount that we're requesting, the percentage that is going to be served within the Sequim school district boundaries, because we would prefer to our City of Sequim money to be spent within our boundaries. And then section 3 is the most important. This is where they describe what is the goal or the deliverable of this funding. We really want it to be intentional, purposeful, to go towards something measurable. And so we're asking them to describe A, what is the goal? And B, what is the measurable outcome of this goal? How are they going to measure if it was successful or not? And so we give them 3 opportunities to state 3 different goals with their associated measurable outcomes. They only have to do 2, but we do suggest that if they request a larger amount of money, that they do 3, or if it's a complicated project, that they submit 3 deliverables. And finally, it's just attestations in Section 4, which they have an option to submit letters of support. And in Section 2, you'll notice that we do request a budget template. We understand that this is an estimate. This is best guess of what the funding is going to be spent on. Obviously, things change and we can do allocations as necessary once the funding is actually active. And then the annual report. So we have an annual report due for each of our applicants at the end of the year, meaning before December 31st of each year. And it's basically a copy and paste. We're asking them again, what was your deliverable? What were the measurable outcomes associated? Were those deliverables and measurable outcomes met? What percentage of that? Were there any barriers for you achieving success with those deliverables? And how did municipal funding affect your program's overall success? Those are the 5 questions that we ask. And then we have upload sections for them to upload their final expense report, detailing what city funds went to go toward. And if they are using city funds for that 25% cap at the indirect expenses, that they have to submit their personal time tracking sheet as well. Finally, here is our funding trends that we have noticed. So we did some research in comparing other cities as well as our historical data. And in 2025, we spent $255,600 in municipal funding. And this is a 220% plus increase since 2015, which equates to about $29.53 per capita, sorry. You can notice in the line graph the funding actuals in the blue line, and you can notice in the yellow dotted line the trend line. And so what we've noticed is kind of an alarming jump in the amount of municipal funding that has gone out over the years, particularly since 2022. And as you heard with Nick, the city is concerned about funding infrastructure projects. And so we just wanted to bring this to council's attention. Another thing we wanted to bring to council's attention to kind of support this is number 2. Sue was able to solicit from other cities their municipal funding like program guidelines, as well as the budgets that they spent on these programs. And of the cities that she solicited, we noticed that between 1 and 1.5 of the general fund was spent on these like programs, versus the city of Sequim, we spend 2+% of our general fund on municipal funding. So the policy direction that we're coming to council for is the final approval of the guidelines or any suggestions that would need to be changed, including those 3 new elements that were mentioned. The annual report that is now required of our municipal funding applicants. We want to know if council would like to view those reports. I can email them to you as one option. Another option is that I could come and do a presentation at the end of the year and present those reports. And number 3 is determining awards. So staff recommend that we present our applicants to you in a council session and that we have full majority for funding approval. Or the other option that staff foresaw was potentially creating a subcommittee, whether it's the finance subcommittee or another subcommittee, to review these applications and award the funding. And finally, staff is recommending a funding cap of 1.5% or less of our general fund each year be spent on municipal funding. And that's to help to protect our general fund and our infrastructure projects. And I am going to invite Sue up here to answer any financial questions you may have, because I'm not the expert there. But I'm happy to answer any questions you have regarding the municipal funding program, these new processes, or any policy direction that we're seeking.
Was taking notes here. would it be possible to make the deadline May 30th? I mean, unless we have a whole nother description about the cycle itself, but sometimes when things are brought to us and we end up having to go, well, we have some questions. Can we have additional information? So I'm wondering if we have the option then to have the 2 meetings in June in case we need to come back.
Next year, yes.
Yeah. Yeah.
This year, unfortunately, we did put the deadline at June.
Well, for sure. No, I'm thinking going forward.
Yes, it can be changed.
And then in following up on Kelly's question about the public reminders, I was also thinking about 2 times, but we've got other, in getting the information out to the public, we've got other venues as well, because I know that, Sequim's got a delegate to, say, the Chamber of Commerce, which is a perfect place to announce something like this as a reminder, because most of the entities are likely chamber members as well. Free ways to get the information out. I'm in favor of full council majority because I think we all need to be accountable to who we're giving funds to. And I do like the annual report requirement, and I'm open emailing presentations is fine, but so that's my thoughts on this. Oh, I had one more thing. I definitely understand the position in getting it down to 1.5%, but I feel like right now I'm not comfortable going with less, because I have a feeling that we're going with potential for federal cuts in programming. I think we're going to see an increase in need, but I do understand the need to keep it to 1.5 for sure.
And I agree with Nicole on that last point, that the world is different than it was in 2015 or even 2020, and that a lot of these grants are what I would consider public health and safety issues. And I think that's really, to me, that's very important, that all members of our community feel safe. We funded the Navigator for the Y to help with homeless youth, and the Sequim Health and, I'm going to say rehab because I'm thinking
that's okay. It's Sequim Health and Housing.
Thank you. That these are really important things that we need to work on to make sure that all of our citizens have access to an important resource, which is housing. So I, again, want to underline that applying for a grant in June and getting the money in January is very out of the ordinary in grant world, and that I don't understand why we can't say this much money is for these grants and that be in the budget, and do it. They might, small nonprofits, which I run, don't always know what they need that far in advance too. And I think applying closer to the time. But it's just, I feel like we're trying to do what other cities do in some places, but when it comes to how grants work, we're trying to do it in a very different way, and it's very confusing for me.
So I have a question for you then, of trying to understand how that would work if it's different from what's being presented. Would that be like, we have $250,000 that we are funding this year, and you can apply for this much of it, or we will only be approving 3 applicants for this amount each, kind of thing. So we make the guardrails,
and then people come and apply for it. Yeah, we say, okay, these are the kind of things we want to fund. And then the people who are looking for the funds come and say, here's what we can do to meet what you want to see done in your community.
And so just to kind of go through because I'm not super familiar with the grant, nonprofit applying for grant part. So what is the typical-ish timeline to apply for grants and then is it closer to 3 months? Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
Rachel, thank you for asking that question. And Vicky, thank you for answering it. That was also on my mind, the how does it compare out there in the world. I like a lot of what has already been shared. And I think, yeah, the 1.5% or less of general fund, very understandable. With the some of those guardrail ideas that y'all just mentioned now. And I can go back and forth on the full council majority versus subcommittee point. It would be really nice if we did it as a full council, because then we would all know exactly where that money was going. And not that we wouldn't otherwise, we just keep it more out in the open, I think. There would be more of this public discussion on the dais is what I was saying. Otherwise it's all in paperwork, which is all completely public record and all of that information out there. But so I guess I just talked myself into the full council majority option. Thank you. I see the Sue has approached the microphone. Yes, go ahead.
I just have a couple of comments regarding what the typical grant program is like. I like the idea of establishing a dollar amount up front so that it is ready to go on January 1st, 2026. We're also a really different type of organization that offers grants. We're a municipality. And so what we're doing is we need to plan for those types of expenditures, especially when we have to fund our union contracts, right? So I think the city is a little different from what your typical grant programs are, but I do appreciate, Vicky, your perspective in that people are usually looking for their funding opportunities to happen quicker. And perhaps that's something we work into the process going forward. What I'm concerned about today is our 2026 budget and getting some guardrails in there and letting people know up in front of 2026 that you've got funding. You've got funding for your YMCA navigator for one more year, or you've got funding for your food bank through SHHC. I think that there is some value in knowing up ahead of time so that you can plan. And I do appreciate that many nonprofits are probably flying by the seat of their pants. But I do think that there are some variables here at work just because we're a city. Does that make sense? Okay.
Yeah, I was trying to think of like we have all of our, what we would like to do, like get the budget done before it's time to get the budget done. But then there's also, well, how can we meet agencies in the middle? How can we meet agencies in the middle? Because I feel like it would be such a letdown to have funding, but if the timeline part of it is a barrier, then it's not accessible and then it doesn't go anywhere. And so I'm just trying to preemptively think of what barriers might be and how can we navigate them now so we don't have to keep coming back to it.
Well, I would say we haven't really changed. We've had the deadline for a couple of years, but you all haven't seen who's applied until it's in the middle of the budget book. And all we're trying to do is allow you to look at those earlier so that when we submit the budget, it's per your decision. So we're not really changing from 3 months to 6 months or whatever. They've applied and then they wait till you all approve the budget in November or December or whatever. So haven't changed that a lot, but I don't mind shortening it. We'll just have to figure out how to do that if that's your choice. The other thing I wanted to clarify is the full council, I think majority means 4 out of the 7. Like, I don't think we were suggesting it had to be unanimous, although you may want to do that if you think you can get that, but whatever. It was just not just a couple people doing it, but it was 7 people discussing this and getting 4 thumbs up or whatever, however you want to do that. So,
And to perhaps provide some clarification, so I've been working this program for a little over 2 years, and we've received comments regarding they need an easier application process, which is why we would do it online. We've received comments that they need the guidelines or made more sense. They've received comments about late applications. And so everything that we've received comments on from our applicants, we have tried to address. We have never received a comment on the funding timeline being unusual or stressful or hard on an organization. We are currently
received late applications.
Yes.
That's a comment on the funding time on the deadline.
So the June 15th deadline, mostly it was that they had forgotten was the number one comeback there. But we are currently receiving comments. I think I've received a number of them on how much funding can we request, which is part of the reason for the need for the funding cap. That's probably the number one concern that I don't really have an answer for our applicants right now. I'm sure there could be a myriad of other reasons, but those are the ones that I've heard from our applicants or our potential applicants.
I'm pretty sure the Y application was because they found out they lost other funding, right? And they wanted to apply.
I was just going to ask kind of related to that was, can you recall, it's okay if you don't, but can you recall the most that has been requested?
So the most
from one applicant.
Yes, that would be SHHC, and they requested 131,000. And for the YMCA, to kind of put it in perspective, because it was a late application, we couldn't fund it in our general fund budget, and we had to get approval for the rainy day fund. And so that is, kind of what Sue was indicating. It's kind of a more challenging process when you come to a municipality. Unfortunately, budget does just take a lot of time. But yes, SHHC does receive the bulk, but however, they are a collaboration of about 5 entities.
And they apply every year?
So they can request a 1-year or a 2-year term. Currently, they're in a 2-year term, which does expire at the end of this year. So we would expect an application this year for funding in 2026. However, we have not received that application yet.
Okay.
And didn't they start at 75 and it's grown, it's incrementally increased since?
Yes.
Because I was trying to think, like, how can we just make it simple? What if we just said we have this much in a pool, but every applicant can apply for 50,000, but because of the SHHC kind of blowing that range out of the water, it does make it difficult. It makes it hard to make it easy.
Vicky, please go ahead, because I think, are you responding to Rachel? I have something after you're done.
Okay. So what I've seen before with other grants is you have a pool of money and the people apply, and if they don't ask for all the money, we could put it back in the budget, or we can ask the applicants, or divide what's extra among the applicants. That's what they do with some of the state funds and federal funds that I've seen.
So I'm also thinking okay, when I was with Head Start and, doing the parent volunteer thing for that, and we'd look at the budget, and there was a ranking system for families applying to the Head Start system, and that made it like a level playing field to also prioritize the neediest of the needy. And how can we apply that? Because it would also be tough to say, you can only ask for $50,000, but then, the navigator position, well, then they have to find a huge chunk of money somewhere else. And that could potentially negatively impact how we impact our community. Does that make sense? And so it's like, how do we try and make it easier for everybody, but still make sure all the funding gets used, but still make sure it's accessible, but still make sure we don't only get one application kind of thing. It's, you see where my mind is like feeling out of control.
These are very good questions. I don't have a response to that right now, but I do have a potential roadblock that's percolating here for me is that so if we cap it at 1.5%, but we allow applicants to choose a one-time lump sum, a 1 year, or a 2 year. Well, if people choose 2 year and we cap it at 1.5%, then that 2 year commitment is going to be dipping into 1.5% pool in multiple years. And so I'm not sure about setting a defined amount. That doesn't, for me, that doesn't seem to make sense. And I'm just having an idea here, just putting something out there. If it makes sense, let's run with it. If not, no. But what if we have our application period, people apply, and then based on who applies, we look at how much of that 1.5% hasn't been spoken for already, and then divide it equally between the applicants? I don't know. This is really good conversation. Like I said, I just was putting that up. I feel like I'm putting a sticky note on a board. We can rip it up later or not.
Let me jump in here because obviously we're going to need a second touch on this. So before we get too far down the road, I want to make sure that staff has enough information to bring back for what we would want. So you guys have everything that you would need?
Thank you. I'm gonna reiterate just so I can make sure that I've captured it exactly how you want it. And for context, we only have 2 applicants actually who have applied for 2-year terms. The rest are 1 year or one time. So the minority of our applicants are applying for 2-year terms, but that may not always be the case. And we mostly have that because of our larger funding amounts require a complex contract rather than just a standard agreement. And so it does take a little bit more time to work out. And we don't want to do that every year, but we're happy to if that's the direction you would like.
Maren, thank you very much. Clearly, I was speaking without any of the data in front of me, and appreciate you providing that context. Mm-hmm.
Absolutely. So for my understanding from council, you would like to move the application deadline, obviously not this year, but in the years preceding, to May, the end of May, the last day of May of each year. Also, to my understanding, we are not accepting late applications. However, we are doing 2 to 3 public reminders spread out between January and end of May via the newsletter, our website, and potentially utilizing social media as well. And also for my understanding, we are approving an annual report. I heard that you would like those annual reports presented to full council. Did I get that understanding correct? Okay. And then also to my understanding, you would like the full council majority for awarding all funds, meaning I present our applicants to a council meeting. Okay. And then I don't know that I'm comfortable stating direction on the 1.5% or less. I think that's what we need the second touch for. Is that correct?
Yeah, I'm also confused about where we're going with that.
I mean, I'll reiterate that I felt it was reasonable to reduce to the 1.5%, but I wasn't comfortable going below that just because we know we're going to have an increased need. So if we're all okay with 1.5%, then she could proceed unless you would prefer a second touch.
I'm fine with 1.5%.
1.5% would be a reduction to what we currently have in our 2025 budget. However, we only have 2 applicants submitted so far this year. So we could get a lot more, but just letting you know where we stand. Harmony?
I just wanted to observe that if we move the deadline back to May 30th, that we are increasing the time frame between receiving the application and when the awards are funded. And that doesn't sound, I'm just making an observation. I personally think that that's way, way too long. I'm kind of here with Vicky. World is so volatile right now, and being that I work for nonprofit entities, I don't think that makes sense. So perhaps through the I'm just going to stop there. Thank you.
I can bring that back for a second touch as well.
Well, and so let me turn to Sue. Sue, we could almost go the other way, knowing that we're cleaning up all of the other variables. If the only thing left is that we could move the deadline to July 1 or to July 15th, knowing so we could even get closer to when we submit the budget, knowing that it's only going to be 1.5 and that we're going to bring it into you all, the people that apply. So we don't need a bunch of time. So I don't think we need to go earlier. I think we actually could either keep it or go later and still be okay. And that would probably address Vicky's.
So for clarity, to help myself understand, with the 1.5% in black and white, it is easier to push the deadline closer.
Absolutely.
Later.
It's when we get last minute requests that we suddenly have to add into the book, and you've got to find funding for it, and the couch cushions, and that's the toughest part.
And the reason I was asking was because of what Nicole brought up of allowing us the 2 meeting opportunity to be able to look at it.
Yeah, I think we could move the deadline back to June 30th, give them a couple more weeks.
Sure.
We take the awards to council in July. I'm able to implement and stick it in the budget in August and still be able to deliver a balanced budget to you in September.
Okay, so can we change the due date to July 3rd? July 30th?
June 30th or July 1st?
Whatever Sue said, sorry.
Okay, June 30th.
Yes.
Yes, I will absolutely make that change.
Thank you.
Can I ask for clarification? So I know we need to get a final report from, did you say you wanted everybody wanted a copy of the written report? Did you want them all to come in and do a full presentation on their report to you all?
All I care about is that I get something from them.
Yeah.
So how is that presented to me? I don't care.
Well, and we can easily.
It's nice having it all, like if Marin could, if she had the capacity to present it, then it is full transparency, public meeting, all at one time, all in one space.
And I do notify our applicants whenever their topic is coming up before council and invite them to attend. However, I do say that unless they're invited to come up to the podium to speak, that's what historically I have done. We don't have to do it that way. But.
And we always post their final report publicly too. So, so you'd have access to read the details or whatever, so.
No, I was just thinking, I'm happy to receive the annual reports by email, but it might be nice to have a summarized presentation for the public.
Yeah.
After it's all been awarded, to be able to say, this is what we've done with your funds.
I can do that. Harmony?
Thank you. I'd also like to add to the notification process a press release, because that's also free, in my understanding, and we should be reaching everyone in as many different ways as possible. So a PR, quick press release, that would be what I'd also add to the list of ways to notify people, please.
Thank you.
If other counselors are all right with that.
Okay, did we hit them all?
Just the funding cap, but I can bring that back for a second touch.
I'm fine with 1.5. 1.5.
1.5 is what.
Consensus.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Then yes, I believe I have everything, and I can bring this back on consent agenda for our next meeting.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, counselors.
All right. Anything for open discussion?
I'm going to be attending the next council meeting virtually from my hotel room because the 23rd will be the day before the Association of Washington Cities annual convention, which I'm attending with Port Angeles Councilor Drew Schwab as part of the final bit of the Waselli program. And it's a 6-hour drive. So I'm not going to get up and start driving at like, I don't know, 7 or whatever it is in the morning on Tuesday. I'm going to drive on Monday and then tune in with y'all from the hotel room. So I will see you virtually next time. What's that?
Is this the same event where we needed to sign up to be voting delegate?
Yes, thank you. So I have already signed up to be a voting delegate for the AWC annual meeting where they will award or review the next slate of candidates for the AWC board and do other AWC business. And Rachel, you're signed up as well. So we need one more voting delegate. Anyone interested? You don't have to decide now. We could always folks could probably, we should have this probably decided before next council meeting, but we could also, I don't think the business meeting, I don't think is until Wednesday or Thursday. So there would still potentially be time. And we could talk about it at the next council meeting. Let's see.
Yeah, the meeting is Thursday, the 26th. So.
And
I don't believe they have a deadline of like for voting delegates to, say that they'll be there.
I don't think so either.
And it's virtual, which is nice.
Mm-hmm.
Only an hour and a half.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, 4:00, Thursday the 26th. All right.
Is there more information about that? Was that something we got from AWC?
Yeah, if you just look at your AWC emails, they've got lots of, the many, many AWC emails. Thank you, AWC, for keeping us informed. The information about being a voting delegate is in there.
Anyone else? All right. Anybody want to attend the June 17th planning meeting? 2:00. If so, let Heather be back by then. Let Heather know. Otherwise, next meeting will be on the 23rd at 6 p.m. And with that,
I motion to adjourn.
I second.
have a good night.